So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk today, and hello to everybody. I hope you're all safe and well today. So my name is Jenny Walton, and I work for Harvest Plus, which we're part of IFPRI, and I'll give a bit more information about who Harvest Plus is and where we fit in. And in my time today, I just want to give an overview of the major health trends and introduce how biofortification fits into that health trend, and then how those health trends start to dictate food trends, and then how we work with the existing food trends to expand the use and reach, and importantly, impact of biofortification. So health trends. 1 in 4 people suffers from hidden hunger. So 25% of the global population, and the major nutrients of concern are iron, zinc, and vitamin A. So one big health trend there that we really want to sort of focus on today, and some reasons behind that health trend is around poverty. So as we've heard in the previous slides about average incomes, and how many people survive on less than $2 a day, and most people in Africa live on less than $5 a day. And unfortunately, because of the COVID situation, it is going to push more people into poverty, and more people into extreme poverty. So the worst case scenario is that 100 million people could be pushed into extreme poverty because of COVID. So the current situation is actually setting us back in terms of where we've been heading to with public health. So one thing that poverty causes, and the effect that has on food trends and health trends, is that it forces consumers to be heavily reliant on cheap staples like maize, beans, cassava, and sweet potato. And as was shown by my colleague from IFPRI, Jemima, about how reliant low-income consumers are on these cheaper foods. And from a global perspective, it's staggering that 60% of the calories that we consume are from three staples. So it's really important that those staples that people are eating are the best they can possibly be from a nutritional delivery perspective. And what I've said is that micronutrient deficiencies are predicted to be with us at least in the short term. So the burden of that micronutrient deficiency is heaviest in Africa and South Asia. So some of the statistics there: in Nigeria alone, the annual GDP loss caused by hidden hunger, so iron deficiency, anemia, night blindness, and vision loss due to vitamin A deficiency, the cost there is $1.5 billion a year. And we see that trend in several countries in Africa. So there are several strategies to address hidden hunger, and all of which are extremely important and work to reach different parts of the population. And number one idea, and that we should all have access to a diverse diet. So everything that you need, from the fruit and vegetables and fresh foods that we need to deliver all the nutrients that we need. But while we work on that, we all work together so that everyone has access to a diverse diet. We have supplementation, which is a point of use micronutrient formulas or supplements. Fortification, which is large scale food fortification, so post harvest. And then what I'm talking about today is biofortification. So who are we? So Harvest Plus is a non-profit. We're part of the CG organisation with our head office in IFPRI. And we exist to be part of the solution to hidden hunger, and I say part of the solution with those other interventions that I mentioned. And our major target is the smallholder households that rely mainly on food that they've made at home. We heard earlier that whilst the trend is moving away from home consumption, 80% of food consumed is globally is purchased in markets and commercial systems, is that there is still a very sizable part of the population, and also in the low income population, that rely on food that they've produced at home. And what we do is we let the plants do the work. So the foods that people are growing and consuming at home, we find the varieties and develop the varieties of those foods that are nutritious as possible through plant breeding. So that's through conventional techniques, not through genetic modification. And also there is agronomic biofortification, where you can actually add fertilizers to crops to increase the micronutrient content. So as I just said, a bit more of a description about what biofortification is. So it is traditional plant breeding or agronomic practices, and importantly, when these foods are consumed, they generate measurable improvements in micronutrient intake and, importantly, status, and then the health outcomes. So I'm not going to get into the evidence of how consuming biofortification actually has a large and demonstrable impact on public health. All of the available evidence, the nutritional evidence, is there on our website, and also strongly endorsed globally by governments and public health figures. So moving on to food trends. So these are some of the biggest trends that we're seeing in the global food industry, and importantly in the food industry in Africa. So a huge trend being meat free, and that's whether that is because of religious or financial reasons. People want to reduce or avoid meat in the diet, but plant-based foods can be an essential source of these nutrients, so iron, zinc and vitamin A. Clean label, so consumers not wanting additives and GMO, and unfortunately that can lead consumers to avoid fortification, as they misunderstand and perhaps think it's like a chemical additive. Natural, so people want to see natural foods, natural source of vitamins and minerals, and ethical. Even under the lowest budget, consumers are wanting to ensure that they're buying something that's good for me, good for their families, and good for the world and the environment around them. So luckily, and biofortification is sat in the middle of all of these is health trends, and can deliver something in each of these areas. And then how COVID-19 is affecting food trends and shopping habits. So just a few examples there. So even from last year, we saw the functional foods and fortified foods market in South Africa is increasing year on year. So biofortification fits into that trend there in terms of it's a naturally functional food. Consumers are wanting to take control of their own health and immunity. So immunity boosting foods are seeing a huge global expansion. And zinc, which is a good source of zinc, is the biofortified varieties of wheat and rice, and are sat poised to deliver a really a good source of zinc to the diet and improve immunity. And then importantly, consumers are because of social distancing, looking to do fewer shops, and where they can is to purchase food online and have food delivered to the home without being in the supermarket environment. And Harvest Plus is working with our SME partners and larger food businesses of how we can set up e-commerce markets and allow biofortified foods to be in the e-commerce food systems. So very often we're asked about how you create consumer demand for biofortification. How do you educate consumers about biofortification? And we don't see it like that. What we actually do is we look at the existing consumer trends and the food trends going on, and then we work inside those health trends. So rather than doing a job about explaining what biofortification, when we would never recommend using the word for biofortification with consumers, it's just about natural source of vitamins and minerals. What we importantly do is listen to our consumers, so the consumers in smallholder farmers, but also consumers in the other end of the spectrum with affluent consumers, and to see where their health trends are going. Listening to everybody within the value chain. So what do consumers want? What do manufacturers want? What do retailers want? What do aggregators need to actually build these and aggregate biofortified foods? And then working with those market research experts. So a few examples there of our market research partners. So Euromonitor, who we use their reports and information all the time, Leatherhead Food Research, and then listening to retailers like Sainsbury's, who see biofortification is going to be mainstream even by as soon as 2025, as consumers are really interested to see natural sources. And then, importantly, the work that we're doing now is moving on to the next phase. Is that I mentioned that biofortification is not a consumer-friendly term. We'd never use that term on packaging, and the manufacturers that we work with, we recommend them not to use it. Just talking about natural sources of vitamin A, natural sources of zinc, and a natural source of iron that actually comes from the plants, and no additional ingredients. And that consumers and manufacturers are saying that there are communication barriers that we have to overcome, and how we can quickly communicate the benefits of biofortification, about the natural nutritional benefits, but also about the program. So we heard from Judy at Nestle there about how consumers want local, and how we can communicate the benefits of local food systems. So we are leading work in this area to find simpler ways of communication, and whether that is through a logo scheme, which we've just finished a survey there, but also about creating international nutrient standards that actually set the targets and the thresholds for the amounts of nutrients that biofortified foods have to contain to be designated biofortified, and how that is then translated to something really quick and simple on packaging. So just to summarize what I've been through today, so just a reminder of the statistics on malnutrition, how 1 in 4 people are suffering from micronutrient malnutrition or hidden hunger, and that COVID-19 has had a major impact on this, on consumer behaviour and interest in food, but also on purchase patterns. And that low income and poverty forces consumers to rely on cheap staples. So it is essential that we increase the nutrient density of the major food sources that that consumers are reliant on the most. And it's biofortification is an essential tool that we can use in nutrition security, not just food security. And that in order to increase the reach and impact of biofortification, we concentrate on the food systems interventions, which I haven't really gone into today, but how we work with governments and policy to include biofortification in there. But importantly and sustainably is how we build demand through commercial and consumer trends, and that the commercial food systems is where we see that biofortification will be adopted and sustainably embedded into the food system. And that biofortification, or naturally nutritious foods, as we call them with our partners, fits perfectly into the world's biggest food trends right now. So we are in a good place to expand the use and reach of biofortification to more consumers globally. So thank you very much for your time. I'm very happy to ask questions either here or later on if you would like to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I think we are right on time. Yeah, you in your last slide, I think you summarized some of the questions I had on the COVID trends. Many of the countries that were importing, the African countries that were importing rice, eggs, from Asia, whether it's rice from Pakistan or eggs from or soy from China. What has been your observation about the impact of COVID on that? Because then it goes to really the heart of the diet, considering that the in-country production or even from neighboring countries doesn't suffice. And coming back to, something that has been a thread in the other two earlier presentations about dietary diversity. The urban dietary diversity that we are seeing, in my opinion, is not translating into the fact that many of those products are locally produced. So yes, you could have people eating more eggs and more rice, but that is not translating into a rural economy. What are your thoughts?
So to answer the first question on COVID and the impact on food supply, yeah, what we are seeing is that the biggest impact on COVID is on the higher value, longer supply chain food products. So also those that are reliant on cold storage. So they're the ones that like dietary diversity are the ones that are having the most impact. What we're finding is our programs are largely unaffected by COVID, and that we are managing at the moment to be planting as normal and ensure that the basic staples are available to be grown this year, which is good news. But we are seeing the bigger impacts on things like milk, cheese, eggs, those kind of added value foods. More expensive foods are having the supply chains there are more disrupted and suffering more from COVID. And then the second question about sort of urban consumers and changing food systems, and we know that consumers really want to buy local, support local, and we're finding that the manufacturers that we're working with, and we will work with all manufacturers to promote biofortification into food systems. So even the biggest global food manufacturers that you sort of imagine that have got a global presence have a very local presence. So we just heard then from Julie, who was talking about local production in Nigeria, and they're involved in procurement of biofortified orange maize, and then in Zimbabwe as well, how we can work with our supply chain to ensure that the biofortified varieties go into food production there. So you can have like a big global brand with a very local food system. And I think the big food manufacturers are on top of this trend, and they want to ensure that whilst they are a global brand, that they still have a local presence and delivered food that's been sourced locally. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay, the two related questions, one from Jemima and one from Moyo, about the meat-free trend. The question is this relevant really for Africa? And also, how do you balance between not having the meat and for health reasons? And I'll add what I used to tell Joanna before, that I was a vegetarian growing, and it wasn't by choice, but that's what my parents could provide. So the trend now became trendy to say you are vegetarian, when many Africans are vegetarian, but not by choice. You can't afford the meat. So tell us about the meat trend, the meat-free trend in Africa.
So absolutely, and is this the sort of meat-free being a trend in populations where more affluent populations where it's a choice, and it seems to be trendy not to to eat meat and be vegan or vegetarian. So biofortification was developed generally for populations that don't have access to animal foods. So when you have an animal-free diet, or you're vegetarian or vegan, you will start to lack vitamin A, iron, and zinc, because the animal foods are a good source of those nutrients. So biofortification puts those nutrients into plant-based foods. So we are making plant-based diets higher in the nutrients that you find in diets with animal foods. And then the meat-free trend is helping us to popularize biofortification, in that we don't want it to become food like for the poor people. And there was a question before about how sorghum has got that reputation of being like a poor person's food. Nobody wants to eat like the poor person's food or food for the poor people. So it's important that biofortified foods have a really good image for the whole population. So the meat-free trend in Africa is hugely relevant for the population there, because they're meat-free by choice or because of circumstance. So ensuring that meat-free diets are high in all of the nutrients like vitamin A, zinc and iron is essential. And then creating awareness about how to have a healthy meat-free diet with all of the nutrients that we need. So yeah, meat-free, very relevant in another population where people are vegetarian by choice as well as by design.
What has been your experience with the governments, as you say, working with the governments about biofortification? Because many countries enforce the fortification in the flour, the salt, the cooking oil, but are not willing to invest in research in biofortification.
The response and by governments is really good. And as you say, the research, agricultural research is expensive. And the agricultural research at Harvest Plus and through IFPRI and through our CG partners, that's the donor funded part. So the technology of the varieties that are high in nutrition is there, it's ready, so that the actual background research has been done, and we have the varieties ready to go. And importantly, this isn't a competition between fortification and biofortification. We need both. So biofortification reaches parts of the population that don't have access to food systems, so people who are reliant on food at home. But also when there are shocks in the food system, like we're seeing at the moment with COVID, and it's not possible to fortify, there's not enough time to fortify, or the manufacturers aren't getting on board with fortification. So you have biofortification there as a backup. And in many cases, we work with governments to create guidelines that are about biofortification and fortification. So we're currently working in Zimbabwe on guidelines that include all three, so supplementation, biofortification, and fortification. And we've also just successfully worked in Tanzania with the publication of guidelines for biofortification in the population. So we do have a very good government response, and the main reason for that is because biofortification is so cost effective. So once you introduce the biofortified varieties into the food system, and we work with the commercial food systems to make them that's embedded and sustainable in there, it's a one-off piece of work and one-off cost, whereas other interventions you have to continually do, so you have to continually fortify or continually supplement. So in general, we do have a very good response from local and international government organisations.
Thank you, Jenny.